Right, welcome back. And this video is going to be showcasing my advanced astrological global disaster prediction system. Now, really quick, this is a report from the year 2300. My lore induced ass content. I like to make videos with stories and narratives that are from the future. So, cosmic consciousness crisis mapping is what this is called. And this is our system overview, our temporal dimension astrocartography. So here's our core technology, and that is quantum astrological positioning system, also known as QAPS 2300. And here's our data sources. We're using multi-temporal natal charts, all nation 1776 and present. So again, from 1776 all the way to 2300. We're using planetary biosphere consciousness signatures, collective karma resonance patterns, past future probability cloud analysis. So here's our critical period analysis for 2026 through 2035, and this is just like a pre-tense, past tense type of thing. I don't know if that makes sense, but so the Uranus-Neptune convergence crises, which happens this year, February 3rd, 2026 is when I'm recording this, but it's happening from 2026 through 2027. And using an astromathematical calculation, also known as an AMC, we use our global midpoint activation, which is very important when you're trying to predict accidents. This helps us predict things better. So our GMA equals what? Uranus 2026 multiplied by Neptune 2027 is Pluto 2025 multiplied by Saturn 2028, where Uranus enters Gemini June 2026. Neptune is at 0 degrees Aries in March 2027. Okay, so here's our predicted events. First of all, we have Pacific seismic surge, July through September 2026. And here's the trigger configuration, also known as the TC. So Mars and Jupiter midpoint. What does that mean? Saturn and Pluto at 17 degrees Capricorn and Leo. And it's activated by Uranus at 29 degrees of Taurus in May 2026. Now, before we go further, I am using my own natal chart to help you understand this in this slide. But in the next tab, we're going to be going over just basic global disaster predictions without my natal chart. So first of all, locations, Japan's Trench, here's the degrees, Cascadia subduction zone, enhance calculation using my chart. So my vertex is at 2403 degrees of Libra, and it forms an exact square to transiting Uranus. And here's the personal resonance. I have to avoid Pacific coastal regions during this period. And here's the global impact, 8.3 through 8.7 magnitude seismic events predicted. Very quickly. So now let's go over our North Atlantic weather anomalies from January through March of 2027. And here's the configuration. So Neptune is at 0 degrees Aries, and it's squaring the USA natal sun, which is at 13 degrees Cancer, going off the Sibley chart. So my Neptune in my chart is at 1555 degrees of Aquarius, and it forms a grand trine with this activation. And the locations, Eastern USA, Western Europe coastal regions. And here's the midpoint analysis. So the USA's moon and Mars midpoint is at 22 degrees Scorpio, and that equals a transiting Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. And here's the result: unprecedented winter storms, coastal flooding. And here's my personal warning: my 4th house cusp is at 29-34 degrees Cancer, and it's just family home impacts. And this is literally happening from January through March of next year. And I was born and raised in Minnesota, one of the coldest states in my opinion. So I'm predicting right now that there's going to be unprecedented winter storms and possibly coastal flooding. So let's get into 2028 through 2029, the Saturn-Pluto revolution. This is our global midpoint network, our GMN. So a critical midpoint is what? Well, all national sun-moon midpoints, where Saturn is at 18 degrees of Pisces and squares Pluto at 18 degrees of Sagittarius. And here's my predicted events for this. We have technological infrastructure collapse, September 2028. So Mercury retrograde is at 13 degrees of Virgo opposing Neptune. And in my personal chart, my Mercury is at 1831 degrees Pisces and it forms a quincunx. Locations this is taking place: Silicon Valley specifically is going to get hit, Singapore, and here's the midpoint precision. So Silicon Valley founding chart in 1971, the ascendant in midheaven equals Mercury, Neptune, midpoint. Here's the prediction: a 3-day global internet outage. 3-day global internet outage. AI system anomalies. We're already seeing this, right? Robots in real life. Cyborgs. So yeah, September 2028 is when I'm predicting this 3-day global internet outage is going to take place. Specifically, Mercury retrograde at 13 degrees of Virgo opposing Neptune being the trigger. So here's my agricultural disruption chain prediction. From April through May of 2029, with the configuration being Jupiter in Cancer opposite Pluto in Capricorn. Now personally, I have Jupiter retrograde at 1755 degrees Libra, and that triggers personal food security issues. Locations this is hitting the most is Midwest USA, Ukraine black soil region, and Australian wheat belt. The severity is a 40 to 60% crop reduction in affected areas. Let's talk about 2030 through 2032, the Neptune-Pluto generation shift. So this is an advanced calculation method, and I'm going to be using my chart as a resonance amplifier. So first of all, here's the disaster probability. My vertex, which I know is at Libra, and the global node, so my vertex multiplied by the global node, divided by my fortune, which is in Sag, and multiplied by the age of nation. Okay? Here's the predicted events. So 2030, the California megaquake, October specifically of 2030. And here's our astro mapping overlay. We have transiting Pluto at 2 degrees Aquarius conjunct the USA's moon at 3 degrees Aquarius. My Chiron is at 0.22 degrees Aquarius, and it acts as a personal warning system. So here's the epicenter. You can take note of these degrees specifically, but the Los Angeles Basin and the midpoint analysis is the LA City chart from 1781. Sun and Mars equals Pluto, and the node 29 degrees Capricorn, and the magnitude is 8.9 predicted tsunami warnings for Pacific Rim. Okay? 2031 through 2032, the European energy grid failure. So Saturn-Uranus conjunction at 25 degrees Gemini, with my activation being my Rahu, or the north node of the moon, at 25-19 degrees Aries, and that forms a square, with the timing being winter of 2031 through 2032. Hardest hitting locations, Germany, France, the duration being 2 to 3 weeks in affected regions. You can take note of these coordinates if you want to. So long-term disaster patterns from 2033 through 2045, we have what? The Great Reset cycle from 2033 through 2035. And using my chart as a temporal anchor, I can see with 2033 coastal megacity flooding. Neptune is going to be at 29 degrees Pisces in March 2033. My sun is at 809 degrees Pisces and it receives a direct transit. Locations this is hitting the hardest: Miami, Bangkok, Shanghai, Mumbai, and here's the midpoint calculation with a global moon and Venus midpoint that equals Neptune and Pluto at 11 degrees of Aries and Sagittarius, and the impact is permanent inundation of low-lying areas begins. 2034 through 2035, volcanic activation period. The configuration is Pluto entering Aquarius in 2034, and there's a Saturn return of my generation, also known as Generation Z. So my personal timeline is my Saturn return in Cancer in the 3rd house. The high-risk volcanoes are Yellowstone caldera, monitor June 2034, Campi Flegrei, critical October 2035, and Mount Fuji, awakening predicted 2034. And here's the space-related disasters, because I know you guys are going to ask about this. 2036 through 2040, these are the advanced space weather predictions. 2036, solar maximum crises. So astromapping involves what? Well, we're looking at space-related disasters. So sun is at a maximum activity during what? The Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Libra. And my vertex activation is an exact conjunction with transiting Jupiter. Here's the effects. By 2036, there's going to be satellite destruction, 30 to 40% of LEO satellites, power grid failures across 55-degree latitude regions, and communication blackout lasting 2 to 3 days. I've already talked about this. 2038, asteroid threat window. Here's a calculation using fixed star resonance. No other YouTuber is doing this. So my algol actually is, again, in my ascendant, my rising sign. I have this placement. It's 26-14 degrees Taurus, and it's square transiting Pluto at 26 degrees Aquarius. The risk period is September through November of 2038. The probability is a 1.2% elevated from baseline 0.001%. The size is 100 to 300 meter range objects. Okay? Here is my advanced midpoint prediction methodology. Quantum midpoint calculation system, QMCS 2300. Here's the formula. Global Disaster Probability Index. Now this might all look confusing, but I'm explaining it. So I know that G_I is georesonance factors for tectonic, magnetic, etc. I know that PI is for planetary position harmonics, and M_J is for critical midpoints activation levels. Here's the application to my own personal chart with my personal disaster resonance field. So, my DRF is my vertex multiplied by my fortune divided by my ascendant multiplied by my midheaven. My disaster resonance field, again, DRF equals what? 24.05 multiplied by 22.0167. We're going off of the degrees of my natal placements. And then, of course, here's more math. Okay. So here's the interpretation of all that math. So 0.748 indicates that I'm 74.8% more sensitive to detecting global disaster precursors than the average population. Now, am I calling myself a genius? Yes. By choice? No. By natal chart? Yes. So, critical midpoint configurations for 2026 through 2040. The Sun and the Moon equals Uranus and Pluto, global transformation points. Here's the activation dates. 2026, 17 degrees Gemini and Sagittarius. 2029, 22 degrees Leo Aquarius. 2032, 4 degrees Libra Aries. 2036, 29 degrees Scorpio and Taurus. So Mercury Venus equals Mars Saturn, accident and infrastructure. Personally, my Mercury Venus conjunction amplifies these periods, the high risk years being 2027, 2031, and 2035. Jupiter and the node equals Saturn and Pluto, large scale disasters. Here's the calculation for my chart again. My Jupiter and my node midpoint, which is 2137 degrees Libra and Aries. The global activation when transiting Saturn-Pluto conjoins this point, and the next occurrence is 2033, exact to 002 degrees. Astro mapping hotspots, using my chart as a resonance detector. So first of all, you can do this too. This is the Pacific Ring of Fire activation 2026 through 2036 with my sensitive longitudes. My vertex line is right through Seattle and Vancouver. My anti-vertex is through Tokyo. These regions will experience 3.2 times more normal seismic activity during Uranus in Gemini, which is 2026 through 2033. Magnetic anomaly zones calculated from my Mercury-Uranus conjunction. So 50 to 55 degrees north latitude band, my Mercury resonance, and 15 to 20 degrees south latitude band for my Uranus resonance. Effects, compass navigation failures, animal migration disruptions. And then weather pattern shift lines using my Moon-Neptune trine. So my moon line is, the moon line is 96 degrees west longitude central USA, and the Neptune line is 0 degrees longitude Greenwich meridian. So these meridians become boundaries for new climate zones forming from 2028 through 2032. Again, we'll go over some safety. So my high-risk periods are 2026 this year through 2040, actually. So using my natal midpoints as a warning system. Here's the immediate threats of this year for me. I know now that March 8th through the 12th, there's the Sun conjunct my Uranus, which is 650 degrees Pisces. I need to avoid air travel and electrical systems. Safe locations are inland and away from coastal areas. So from June 18th through the 22nd, Mars is squaring my Jupiter-Saturn midpoint. I should avoid public transportation and large gatherings. Here's a note. My vertex activates fated encounter possible. In the medium term, warnings 2027 through 2029. My Saturn opposition Mars period is late 2027. And then infrastructure accidents near me possibly will occur, with the recommendation being to stockpile 2-week emergency supplies. My Neptune square moon is happening early 2029 with deception and disaster reporting and trusting my intuition over official information. So then there's long-term preparations for 2030 through 2040. 2030, 2034, 2038. So 2030, I'll be relocating away from 122 degrees west longitude, my vertex line. 2034, establish sustainable food, water systems before my Saturn return. 2038, create digital archive of knowledge before predicted solar event. Okay. And then advanced prediction technologies, 2300 perspective, what we now understand about my era, your era, 2026 and beyond, as I'm posting this. Consciousness-based disaster prediction. So my 11th house is a Pisces stellium overload. Okay, it was an early prototype of collective premonition ability. My breakthrough this year is the first scientific validation of astrology-based earthquake prediction. My role is unknowingly contributing to disaster awareness through social networks. Temporal navigation systems, my retrograde network, Jupiter-Saturn node created personal time distortion field. Here's a historical note. I experienced 2026 through 2040 disasters as premonitions from 2025. Our technology, QAPS 2300, evolved from studying anomalies like my chart. Fixed star resonance mapping, my algal Spica Fomalhaut triangle was template for planetary protection grids. If you don't know what these things are, these are what we call fixed stars. So in 2300, these stars now anchor dimensional stability fields around Earth. My contribution is living proof that fixed stars influence disaster probability. Critical discoveries from analyzing this era, the 2028 tipping point. So historical records show 2028 as when conventional prediction models failed. Astrological methods became primary disaster forecasting tools by 2032. Using my chart, I lived through this transition unconsciously. 2034, consciousness shift. Global disaster frequency increased, but mortality decreased, with the cause being collective consciousness evolution accelerated by crisis. My role in this is my Rahu in Aries in the 12th house. I pioneer consciousness, and it helps anchor the shift. 2040, resolution point. Disaster patterns shifted from random to harmonic by 2040, with the mechanism being humanity learned to work with planetary rhythms. My legacy is I help prototype this new relationship with Earth systems. Here's the final predictions and recommendations for this tab. So for me specifically, I should avoid, from 2026 through 2028, avoid Pacific coastal regions, especially with that 122 degree west longitude. 2029 through 2032, relocate to 40 through 45 degree north, or 85 through 95 degree west, Great Lakes region safest. 2033 through 2040, establish sustainable community in Appalachian region. Temporal awareness development. So I track my transits to my vertex for fated disaster encounters. I monitor progressions to my fortune for resource timing. And I use my Mercury trine Saturn for clear thinking during crises. Collective service role. My 11th house stellium designates me as an information node. I develop communication systems resilient to predicted outages, and I train others in my intuitive disaster detection abilities. Historical note from 2300. The period 2026 through 2040 was humanity's greatest initiation. What I experienced as disasters were actually birth pains of planetary consciousness, and my chart, with its unique configurations, made myself particularly sensitive to these transitions. And yeah, we can ignore the rest of that. But let's get into this. So, this is specifically just cosmic crisis forecasting, globally speaking, without my natal chart. So without personal chart. Okay, so our system overview is kind of the same because we're going over quantum astrological positioning system. I mean, that's what we're using, our QAPS 2300, but our methodology is what? It's multi-temporal analysis, consciousness resonance mapping, and probability cloud navigation. Our data source is global natal charts from 1776 through 2300 CE, planetary biosphere signatures, and collective karma patterns. So our critical period analysis for 2026 through 2035 Again, the Uranus-Neptune convergence crisis from 2026 through 2027, and our predicted events may look a little bit different, but kind of similar. We went over a Pacific seismic surge from July through September, when Uranus enters Gemini in June, and Neptune is at 0 degrees Aries in March of 2027. Locations that are going to be affected the most are the Japan Trench, Cascadia subduction zone as well. And the severity is going to be high magnitude seismic events, Mars-Jupiter midpoint activation with Saturn-Pluto resonance. And then North Atlantic weather anomalies. From January through March of 2027, Neptune squares the USA natal Cancer Sun. Eastern USA and Western Europe coastal regions are going to be affected the most by unprecedented winter storms and coastal flooding, with the midpoint activation being global Moon and Mars networks triggering oceanic instability. Here's the Saturn-Pluto revolution. We're going over technological infrastructure collapse again. We know that Silicon Valley, Singapore, and Frankfurt digital hubs will experience 3-day global internet outage and AI system anomalies, with the root cause being collective consciousness resistance to technological determinism in September of 2028, when Mercury retrograde opposes Neptune. Agricultural disruption chain from April through May of 2029. Jupiter is going to be in Cancer, and it's going to opposite Pluto in Capricorn, affecting global breadbasket regions such as the Midwest of USA, Ukraine, and Australia. 40 to 60% crop production in affected zones. Astromapping, we see food supply line meridians experiencing planetary pressure. Okay. Again, with the California megaquake, October 2030, Pluto conjunct the USA's natal Aquarius moon, with the epicenter being LA's basin. The magnitude is 8.9 predicted with Pacific tsunami. Historical pattern, 56-year seismic cycle culmination. European energy grid failure, winter 2031 through 2032. Saturn-Uranus conjunction in Gemini, Germany, France, Benelux region, with the duration being 2 to 3 weeks in affected areas. And the underlying cause of this is a solar flare activity compounded by grid vulnerability. So we can look at all of these predictions pretty much the same as we just were. Okay? At the end of the day, the greatest disaster humanity faced was not earthquakes, floods, or storms, but the illusion of separation from the living cosmos. The events of 2026 through 2040 shattered that illusion, and from the pieces we built our current reality of harmonious cosmic participation. The goal of this video is to understand crisis as evolutionary catalyst using advanced astrology. Advanced genius. So thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in the next one, teaching you more.